Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next session of CME Palooza Fall. I am Scott Kober, one of the co-producers of CME Palooza, and I'd like to welcome you to this afternoon session, which is called Work, Play, Slay, Millennial Perspectives on Well-Being in CPD's Future. This session is sponsored by DKB Med and Clinical Education Alliance. Our moderator for this session is Alana Kaiser. Alana is the Director of Education and Digital Innovation at the Orthopedic Trauma Association, and she is going to introduce the remainder of our panel momentarily. I was going to try to throw in a lot of trendy millennial terms during my introduction here, but I don't want to embarrass myself, so I am going to abstain from doing that. Instead, I am going to do what we always do at the beginning of our CME Palooza sessions. I am going to begin by thanking our sponsors. Our gold sponsors, Haymarket Medical Education, Med Learning Group, and Platform Q Health. Our silver sponsors, Academic CME, Academy for Continued Healthcare Learning, Antidote Education Company, Clinical Education Alliance, Daiichi Sankyo, DKB Med, Helio CME, Integrity Continuing Education, Medscape Education, Projects in Knowledge, and Talem Health. And our bronze sponsors, Answers in CME, AxDev, Bonum Continuing Education, Catalyst Medical Education, CMEology, Excalibur Medical Education, Global Education Group, Goodwin Group, Infograph Ed, Integritas Communication, Iridium Continuing Education, Leading Learning, MedIQ, Partners for Advancing Clinical Education, Paradigm Medical Communications, Primed, QD CME, PVI, Research to Practice, Touch Independence Medical Education, Bindico Medical Education, and Right Medicine. 2 ways to ask questions during this and all of our CME Palooza sessions. You can use the Horizon CME text line, send in the question 267-666-0CME 0263. Or if you are watching this in YouTube, you can enter in questions within the YouTube chat function. We'll get to as many questions as we can throughout this session. You do not have to use appropriate millennial slang. We will get to as many questions using whatever vocabulary words you want to use during this session. There are several audience response questions, some multiple choice, some open-ended. So please get your poll everywhere app ready. During the presentation, it's always CME Palooza 005 or the URL in the web browser on your screen. Finally, please note that the opinions, discussions, and or conclusions expressed are those of our panelists and do not represent an endorsement by or position of their employer, its parent company, or their affiliates. So with that, I am going to turn things over to Alana to get us started.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it. And also thank you to CME Palooza for inviting us here to talk about this interesting talk today. We have 3 panelists here with us today, and I will actually turn it over to them so they can introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Emily Belcher. I'm VP of Research and Analytics at CE Outcomes.
Hi, everybody. My name is Amy Edward. I'm a program manager at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center.
I'm General Manager of Global Education Group.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. All right, we'll go over to our next slide, and we will actually start with our first audience response system question. So first, we just kind of wanted to level set a little bit on generations and then get your input to see what the audience is. So just a little recap, just in case. So baby boomers are born 1946 to 1964, raised in a post-World War II resource-limited society, and is typically about 25% of today's workforce. Gen X, or the silent generation, is born 1965 to 1980, raised in the afterwar but before technology society. They're about 33% of today's workforce. Then we have our Gen Y, or millennials, born 1981 to 1996, raised in an economically stable and technologically advancing society, and is about 35% of today's workforce. And lastly, what we'll get into today is Gen Z, born 1997 to 2010, raised in a digitalized, economically fluctuating society, and is about 5% of today's workforce. All right, so we can turn it over to the results because let's see what we have. All right. Okay, so mostly Gen X here. And then, oh, we're still getting some stuff in. All right. So 60% Gen X, mostly here. We do have almost 30% baby boomer and millennials catching up here, which I feel like is actually very relevant to what we're going to be seeing today and talking about today.
I think one comment here is that Gen Z is at 0%, but these people are in the workforce. So the top age for Gen Z is 27.
Good point, Emily. All right. So we'll go ahead and move on to our first panel question. And we will actually also have another ARS question with that one. So the question that we'll have posed to the audience will be, what is the biggest challenge you all are facing in maintaining healthy work-life boundaries? And while you guys are answering that, I will turn it over to my panel to answer this question, which is, how are millennial managers reshaping the workplace culture in CME, particularly regarding flexibility and productivity? And then what challenges and opportunities does this present? Emily, you want to go first?
Sure. So millennial managers reshaping workplace culture in CME, particularly regarding flexibility and productivity. I'm trying to recap the question. So flexibility, productivity, and values-driven approach is definitely an approach that I take. As far as values-driven, you're more thinking about just making sure that you're providing value. It's more about the quality over the quantity sometimes. Flexibility is important, especially when we're living in this remote world. Many of us are living in. So flexibility definitely is something that I look for and really appreciate. But at the same time, you can kind of balance that with productivity, right? So just because you're being flexible and potentially allowing, or not allowing, but encouraging your employees or those that you work with to take breaks to allow them to have more creative thinking, just more productivity and everything. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be flexible all the time and, you know, skipping work and everything. So I think there's sometimes just a misunderstanding there.
Yeah, jumping in on that, I would definitely agree. You know, that even so much to the nomenclature of like the working the 9 to 5, working whatever the 8 to 4, whatever your hours are. If it's an 8-hour, 9-hour day because you're counting a lunch, you know, that flexibility can really help facilitate a work-life balance. And I know that it kind of gets to the point where I don't know that employees really need to work 8 consecutive hours in order to, you know, qualitatively and effectively do their job. I manage a team of people. I am always an advocate for them. Like if they've got doctor's appointments, if they just need to step out, if they've got things to do with their kids or whatever, do it. Like, I don't think that you need to sit, you know, in front of your desk for 8 hours in order for me to assume that you are doing your job. If you need to break up the day, then break up the day. And I know that there's other peers in this industry that definitely, you know, work unusual hours. And that's not to say that you should be working like 7 until midnight, because that's crazy. But just that flexibility and that giving that sense of self back. I tell my team all the time, like if you're having a day and you just want to go to Target, go check out the dollar section. It makes all of us feel better.
One more thing in addition to that I like to adopt is real-time feedback. So I prefer not to wait until you're getting to the end of your annual or a semi-annual feedback reviews and everything. And I think this isn't necessarily specific to generational, but I do think that we've moved more towards the real-time feedback, providing feedback so that we can have continuous input and continuously adapt to what is being asked. I think sometimes if you kind of wait until those later reviews, you're not able to implement that. And I think a lot of us like learning and really are lifelong learners. So I think that's helpful there too. Amy, I don't think we can hear you. I think you're trying to talk.
No.
So you think you asked about challenges for this. We also, some challenges are maintaining engagement and collaboration, especially when you work in a remote space. I think it's really important to, make sure that you're checking in with your team, you're having those conversations and engaging. There's definitely ways to do that in a higher tech remote world. We, sometimes we'll have team calls where we're sitting there encouraging, what's going on in your life, just touch points, because I do think that sometimes in the remote world you kind of move away from that. And I think sometimes people are like, oh, millennials, they don't care, but I do think everybody cares. I think it's important to just make sure that everybody still feels like a team and that you have that engagement. Anything else?
In the work bubble that we were looking at, I think, what did I see? Work from home being stress or being factors. Thanks, Scott. Disconnection, work-life balance, 100%. Remote. I mean, these are all very relevant. I think at one point in time I saw stress, naps. That's got to be Riaz. Riaz needs more naps for sure.
Yeah, I think at one point I saw, oh yeah, there it is on the top left, a sandwich, which I really appreciate because I like to make myself a sandwich at any time during the day. And I want to have it readily available for me whenever I need it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think, like, again, given our age and where we're at in our careers and our ability to manage people as we're now becoming those people, I think these are all things that we all know and we all are aware that they're issues, and it's a matter of finding ways to implement changes that don't disrupt workflow, that don't upset people. Change is hard, for sure, but work doesn't need to be your end all be all, and I think that that's a big touching point that everybody wants. That balance is important. It's important to mental health, physical health, general well-being, and I think that there's still a lot to learn, especially as I think most of our organizations have gone remote on some level, right?
For sure.
Yeah, Amy, you're still shown as being muted on your computer. I don't know if you can unmute yourself.
Yes.
But that's probably because, yeah, you were, hold on a second. Let me try. So try it again, Amy. Sorry.
Okay, try again.
Yeah, it's been tricky because we're trying to get Amy's audio because she wasn't able to hear us. So we're trying to get her audio and so she can also hear us at the same time. Okay, so keep going. Let me try to take you off, Amy, and let me try to work with you offline for a second.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. The only thing that I kind of wanted to add to this too, I am a millennial manager of a variety of generations. And one thing that I find very important to me is kind of resetting a lot of expectations. So when I came into my role as a manager, they were used to having regular check-ins to say, hey, I'm stepping out for my lunch. Hey, I'm stepping out for a 15-minute doctor's appointments. Like the team's messages were insane. So also trying to help level set those expectations too, of saying like, I totally understand you're going to get your work done. Like, I trust you. This is why I have you employed. This is why I'm keeping you here. Like, I know you're doing good work and I trust you. So also kind of trying to break down some of those previous boundaries that people, like, this might not even have been a rule, but they just felt anxious about having to do this. So they felt like they needed to do this. So that's one thing that I also really like doing, is saying, like, you have that break, you have that boundary, and you don't need to feel anxious, or you don't need to feel like you have to check in, or that I'm going to randomly call you out of nowhere and say, where are you? What are you doing? So I also think that some of that is really helpful as a manager too, to kind of reinforce those expectations or the lack of these expectations, that it's not so intense that some people might feel obliged to do so.
No, absolutely. Right. I think that there's always that concern, oh, if I don't check in, how are people going to know I'm doing work or whatever? Like our company has hired people who were not effective at working from home. Those people weed themselves out immediately. Like you just know. It's one of those things where it's never been a concern of mine. I don't think micromanaging solves anything when it comes to that, but also giving somebody like kind of that work autonomy, like, what you're doing. And if you don't, ask questions, or to what you said, like, I trust you, get your stuff done.
Yeah, and we have a lot of this, so I was trying not to go too far into some of this because I know we're going to talk about this again, but keeping in mind as a millennial manager, a manager in general, that everybody kind of has their own preferences and their own ways that they like to work. And so some people prefer the 8 to 5 and to turn it off after 5, and others prefer that more flexible work and just to be trusted to get their work done afterwards. And depending on what you're doing and what your team looks like, and where you are in that quarter or that day, that does change. And I think just making sure that you're having really good communications about what that expectation is huge.
Perfect. Well, I think that leads right into our next conversation point. So millennials are often called the burnout generation. So how can CME professionals of all generations create and maintain healthy work-life boundary? Oh, am I already getting ahead of myself? Sorry. Where are we?
I think you're
that's the
on.
right one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Maintain healthy work-life boundaries. And then what role do managers play in this?
Yeah, so I think a few things, setting those clear expectations that we talked about, defining work hours, so that might look different for different people. You know, you might have someone who's taking a class or doing some other thing on the side, and if you can adapt to that and you can be flexible with that, that's great. I do think that's what a lot of people, especially still like going back to college and everything else is doing. Just depends on, again, your setting and your workplace and what you're able to do. Also prioritizing tasks. So with burnout, I think sometimes some of that comes from people not really being clear on what their priorities are and they're trying to get everything done. And sometimes just like a check-in and making sure that they have the priorities straight, keeping that open communication. So it's not necessarily micromanaging or like always being on top of that person, but more just like a check-in of like, how's it going? How are you feeling about what's coming up? You can really get to burnout a little bit quicker if you're, just keeping that line of communication open, I feel like. Encouraging breaks and time off. So encouraging taking PTO, encouraging regular breaks, like, oh, I see you have a lot of meetings on your calendar after this. You're going to go grab a coffee or something like that. You're not necessarily telling them what to do, but you're just encouraging that so that they know, you don't expect them to be on the grind 8 to 5. And then leveraging technology wisely is a tip for everybody. I cannot tell you how much time I save by just sometimes stopping what I'm doing when I'm in a crunch and taking a break from it and looking, okay, how can I make this quicker next time? Is there something that I can do that will next time make this more efficient? Whether it's, utilizing AI, which we might get to later, or, putting in a formula a little bit differently next time. That way it auto populates or calculates next time. There's different things that we can do now with technology.
And this might be backtracking a bit for people who might not know, but one of the reasons why millennial generation is often referred to as the burnout generation has a lot to do with the upbringing that we all collectively experienced. Growing up, millennials were kind of one of the first generation who was literally pitted against our peers. If we didn't do it, somebody would come up over top of us and do it. It was always that you've got to do the most extracurricular activities to get those marks to, get into a good college. If you don't do it, your peer is going to surpass you. It's always about trying not to let your peers surpass you. And that continued to play into even post-academically, into those workforces, into that corporate America, where while burnout is very much so alive and well for, unfortunately, everybody, millennial generation is one of the first generations where they identified that as being like, that's all we knew. We just always knew to keep going. Because if we didn't, it was that anxiety that if we don't, somebody else is going to get that promotion. Somebody else is going to get that job. Somebody else is going to get something that you've been working really hard for, as opposed to you just getting it on your own merits. Like, you might be the top employee for that position. You might be the best example or whatever it is, that you've earned it. But that underlying anxiety of that pressure of, well, they might just give it to somebody else because they're also doing as well as me. And oh my gosh, how can I set myself aside and how can I make myself look bigger and better? And if that results in, well, I'm going to work longer hours and I'm going to take on these additional responsibilities. I'm going to say yes to doing this CME Palooza webinar. Whatever it looks like. That's one of the reasons for that term, I guess, in case that wasn't inherently clear to other people. But exactly to Emily's point, trying to mitigate that burnout can be really hard, especially when you are dealing with millennial employees who hear you but don't necessarily believe you because they were never taught otherwise. Whereas I do find it sometimes easier with other peers who do understand the importance of like a family dynamic or taking time for yourself and just being okay with where you're at, sort of thing, because that confidence just sits there with you, resonates with you, and there's not necessarily a constant concern for what next, what if, when is the economy going to collapse, when, like all that kind of I guess back end chatter, that negative feedback that you kind of self-induce.
And I think we talk about burnout a lot in the sense of, having breaks or feeling like you're, work overloaded and stuff like that. But I think one more thing that sometimes goes into it is really actually understanding what you're doing and the value of it. Because I think sometimes, I just feel like sometimes when you're understanding, like encouraging purpose-driven work or communicating like the value of the work or what it's doing, sometimes it just encourages people, not necessarily to, I'm not saying work harder, work more, but just encourages you in what you're doing. And then also providing that continuous feedback too is helpful sometimes too. So they're not just spinning. And by continuous, again, I don't mean you have to always be on top of them. You need to do your own things. It's just like check-in points, or, you know, not waiting until those annual or semi-annual reviews.
I'm just going to try again to talk. Can everybody hear me okay? I apologize for that feedback earlier. I just wanted to add to this in our planning calls, we spent a lot of time talking about the model changing from a work-life balance to a life-work balance. And that really resonated with me, in that the traditional model of this 9 to 5, those hours being set work hours, the number of hours you work is going to get you those promotions, is changing now into prioritizing your personal well-being over work, and like integrating this flexibility into your workday. So it came up earlier in our conversation, and I just wanted to highlight that that's like actually, I think, the way to mitigate some of this burnout is that the workforce now is prioritizing the mental health, the self-care throughout your workday. Your life is becoming more of a priority, and work is becoming a secondary obligation. So I did want to highlight that in this conversation too, is that now, like, you don't hear people say like a life work balance, but I think that is going to be the future of where this workforce is going. So I just wanted to add those comments.
I think it's just so huge when you know, I think everybody here can, you know, you think about when you're sitting here stuck in a rut or something and you just take a break, just go walk, go go to Target, like you said, and go to the dollar section or whatever it is that encourages you. I think not only are you more productive, but then you're also more creative, and you are helping try to head off that burnout before you get there. So.
Yeah, and I'm watching these ARS responses come in. I'm finding it really interesting. We actually came up with this question as we were brainstorming this session, you know, talking about, okay, you know, maybe if you talk to me 5, maybe 10 years ago, however long it might be, I would have said a 40% increase. I'll drop anything. I don't care if I need to work extra. That's insane. But now, you know, having this time, I'm like, I'm happy with where I'm at. I'm happy with what I'm doing. You know, to Emily's point, like, you can find, you know, your greater achievement in the work that you're already doing in different realms. So, you know, it's not just necessarily about the increase in pay, which I can definitely understand may help your life, but oftentimes that does come with a significant, you know, change to your work life. Obviously, there's no ideal situation where you're applying for a job and they'll say, hey, here's your work-life balance going to be. But, you know, it's definitely something that I think millennials, myself and some of my colleagues included, are taking a lot more into consideration when they're looking for a new job, and saying the grass may not always be greener on the other side, and what's truly worth it for me right now. So it was really interesting to see you guys all respond to that. Thank you so much.
I think that definitely echoes what, you know, Amy had said. It's that I want to, you know, basically work to live, not live to work. And especially our earlier poll, knowing that, you know, a lot of the people on here, I think the majority definitely were Gen Xers. This is definitely echoed across generations. Like, we all get it. We're all tired. We're all burnt out. Now, how do we fix it? Let's make it better, especially when we're all on the same page.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to move on to our next question to you all. So for my panel, the concept of climbing the corporate ladder is evolving, as we were just talking about. So how are you seeing the career progression change in CME, and what advice would you give to those reassessing their career goals?
If it's okay, I'll take this one first.
Yeah, go for it.
Thanks. So I think the advice I would give, I don't think this climbing the corporate ladder structure, the hierarchy is it's definitely evolving into, it's not going up, it's sometimes moving laterally, and building your skills. So I would say, like, I think skill development is almost more valuable right now than a title progression. And so in CME especially, we have like so many opportunities in this space to be we're not just learning about accreditation. You can learn about like digital education, analytics, like constructional design, project management. There's so many opportunities within CME to like build out your resume that way and your skills. And there are going to be opportunities in there to grow yourself, and it might not be upward, it could be laterally. And the way that I think millennials and the workforce is going to be learning is you can take on like leadership roles from the middle almost. You don't have to have like a formal management title. You could take on leadership roles and navigate your path more untraditional. I think these untraditional ways of career mobility are gonna take over versus that hierarchy of just moving up the ladder with a title.
Yes, I think that's a great point. I think it allows you to be more adaptable and versatile. I think also another thing that we specifically in the CME world think about is lifelong learning. And I think if you think about it from the younger generation perspective, you know, especially those who are first entering the CME world, like we're here to learn. We're definitely like wanting to learn. And specifically some things are like learning that meets us where we are. So I know that the Alliance has been doing a lot with that too. But so examples though are CME Palooza. Like I've adopted CME Palooza since I came on into the CME world, and just having that quicker technological access to it is really helpful. But then also climbing the ladder, I think some things you have to do is consider what's valuable to you. So kind of like to add on to that, as far as lateral movement, sometimes you're considering things like your work-life balance, like we've already talked about. One benefit to going virtual is we have this geographical flexibility. So that's evolving, and that's allowing climbing the corporate ladder or even lateral changes to look a lot different. And then also in the CME world, it seems like there's a lot of people sometimes considering things like freelance and consulting movements as well.
Especially with the increase of freelance consulting or people who are starting their own stuff, like that kind of turns the idea of a corporate ladder on its head, to be quite honest. It's like, I don't want to climb the corporate ladder. I'm the best at doing this. I'm just going to do my own thing. There's plenty of people who are consultants, very well honed in their own areas of CME respectively, and they bring a value to other companies who maybe don't have the best department for that or whatever, while at the same time not having to deal with the frustrations of what's this corporate ladder look like? What do I do to climb this? How do I, like, they jumped off of it and said, no, I'm good. Like,
and I think all that speaks back to, I think you asked about our advice too. So I think that speaks back a little bit to my advice is reflect on what motivates you. So for me, it's, yes, what motivates you, that success maybe is evolving and kind of looks different for different people. So sometimes that may be that you want to be in a leadership position, which may or may not be going up the corporate ladder. That's a whole other thing. Or it may be that you want to have a better work-life balance. You want more autonomy. And maybe that you want to be in a place that you can be creative and innovate. So just considering what motivates you when you're thinking about job movements. And then also, do you have what you're considering? Is it going to allow you to keep learning? And then also just continue to seek mentorship and coaching and try to diversify your experience, which speaks back to that as well.
So I'm just going to quickly read a few comments that have come in on our Horizon CME text line. These are more comments than questions. A lot of comments that are coming in over YouTube as well. So here's one comment. So definitely agree that productivity is not defined by particular hours. Whether the work is getting done is more important than a particular schedule or location, which I think you guys have talked about. Here's another one. Lots of emphasis in AI in the word cloud, as you can see on your screen. We really need to think hard about how the models are trained and consider the ethical implications rather than just jumping in with the shiny new thing. I know you guys aren't necessarily talking a ton about AI in this session, but it's something that always does come up for us. All right, those are a lot of the comments that have come in. So I'm going to turn it back over to you guys to keep going, and I'll keep monitoring what's coming in from our audience.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, and I think I'm seeing Suzette's comment as well about being more adaptable, but also being careful not to assume more responsibility long-term without type of remuneration, which I definitely think is a good point. I think to your all's point, it's what can you grow yourself and be more adaptable and be more flexible to, and how you can improve yourself that way. And then, if that does reflect upon your actual job responsibilities or whatever else, then you can talk about that, with your organization, with your supervisor, or whomever else. But I definitely think it is, I think some of the stuff that was in the word cloud was mentorship, adaptability, flexibility. Also, thank you so much. Multitasking, tech savvy. So there's always so many things for us to continually learn as we are in CE. So there's lots of different opportunities there. So thank you all for typing in all your thoughts to the word cloud. For the panel, is there anything else that you guys wanted, any advice that you wanted to give before we move on to our next question? All right. Okay. So moving on, let's discuss the generational divide. What tips do you have for younger professionals trying to get their foot in the door, and for seasoned professionals looking to better connect with their younger colleagues?
I can go first. Sorry, it's just trying to let other people speak. So one thing that I would say is kind of goes back to the AI and some other things is if you're a younger colleague trying to get in the door, and just as a reminder, Gen Z's in the workforce, they're 27. So showcasing your tech skills, so adopting your ability to adopt or help CME adopt digital education, use of AI, social media, things like that. That's something that CME has kind of been adapting to. And I think that we could use more expertise, in my opinion, here in our industry. And so that could actually be helpful. Seeking out mentors and building relationships, not being afraid to reach out, can really help you get your foot in the door and also just learn from others, showing that you're eager to learn. Something to consider is that when you do mentors, it's not just like a one-way relationship. So you don't need to feel bad about it. You're not just, pulling in their expertise. You're also probably providing them back some new ideas, some feedback, and just a new way of thinking about things. I know when I'm training people and they start asking me questions, I learn so much from that experience because I'm questioning what I'm doing. Why do I do it this way? Or thinking about it. And it really does reinforce that for me. So I think that's helpful to both parties. And then I guess other things are attending conferences, watch CME Palooza, volunteer, and then, yeah, I think that's all I can think of right now.
Emily, just to piggyback on some of the things you were just saying, I think there's a few. I definitely agree with social media skills, leveraging digital literacy, social media skills, increasing this will be increasingly valuable in CME as we are moving more more of our education online. I think that if you're cross training is really important to acquiring new skills. We talked about last time too, getting more skills within CME will make people more versatile as they come into the role. Also, like you said, networking, mentorship, and I wanted to just highlight reverse mentorship too. So some of the older generation of the workforce can, like you said, learn from the younger generation. So even if you are in one of those older generations, you can seek out mentorship from a younger one. You learn just as much and question the way that work is done, and they'll bring a lot of value and innovation ideas. And so I also think, though, CME is so specialized that if you are new to the workforce, showing your commitment by doing your research, understanding accreditation processes, regulations, and will show your commitment to the field. I know there's a lot of turnover and a lot of effort goes into training new staff. So I think if you can position yourself with taking those steps of understanding the landscape, that will go far as people enter the workforce.
Yeah, you mentioned innovations. I did want to talk about, or not innovation, but new ideas and everything. And I did want to mention, I think what part of the question was about the seasoned professionals too. So I think at times, staying open to new ideas. It's not about necessarily always adopting those new ideas. I think a lot of times we have a lot of conversations about, oh, this is new, so we don't want to throw away out with the old. It's not out with the old and in with the new. It's how do they work together and just trying to be open to that in a conversation. And I think one big thing is trying to encourage, new ideas and also give feedback when they don't make sense. And that's a way to stay open to your younger colleagues or continue to connect with them, is not just, oh, that won't work, but like, oh, that won't work and here's why, so that they understand it and then they can contribute something maybe possibly more valuable.
So I was going to say, I know for me, entering this workplace was definitely, I think a lot of us kind of fell backwards into it, not really sure how we ended up here, and then ended up here. But mentorship definitely was a big part of why I got to like where I'm at today. Having colleagues who are willing to be patient and listen to me being the new person, I think like fresh faced at like 25 at the time or whatever. That can go a long way. But then at the same time too, being able to accept criticism or like critiquing, being able to accept that. I know that I, in my career, have critiqued somebody's, given some sort of constructive feedback on something they might have done. And sometimes they don't take it the way that it's meant to, like it's meant to be helpful. And it turns into well, they don't like me, they hate everything I do. And then you end up kind of down that rabbit hole. And I know that that's not a skill that everybody necessarily has. Even though it feels really simple, but being able to be adaptable and listen to that kind of feedback from peers, older or younger, can really make a difference in long-term development and long-term growth.
So I just want to say, I know part of this is hearing, and I can only speak from my own experience, but I will say there's a few things that I've really benefited from. So entering into the CME world, being able to volunteer and participate. I've participated in the mentorship program through the Alliance, but I also have mentors, many mentors within my company and outside of it. And I've learned so much from that. So I think that for me is probably one of the largest ones. And then as far as, this goes back to one of the previous questions, but thinking about where you're going to work or attracting people from outside of that, like I've heard people say, it's hard for me to find someone that's younger to, it's hard for me to get someone and recruit someone into this new role. And I think possibly communicating some of the things that we've talked about today, I really love my job because we are really open to new ideas and also adaptable and, where we can be as far as flexibility and everything. And I think that is something that the younger generation is looking for. So keeping that in mind and communicating that possibly in interviews, if you are able to address some of those things.
Yeah, and we had a good comment and question come in from Jess, who is saying, as a fellow millennial, one of the bigger issues that I struggle with is the age divide when it comes to embracing new learning styles and moving away from lecture-only conferences. What advice would you give to help close that gap and bring them along? And I think you guys were kind of already hitting on that point a little bit, but is there anything specific you'd want to respond to Jess about this comment?
And I think when it comes to embracing new types of learning and that kind of stuff, sometimes you really just have to push the model in front of people and show them how it works. And sometimes you have to do it again and again. And sometimes you have to take baby steps to show like why it does what it does. And the more you can reinforce that it is actually working, I think the more, when people see there's a success for it, the more people are going to adapt to it or agree and go, oh no, this does actually work. I mean, I think as an industry as a whole, going from didactic lectures, PowerPoints, we've definitely seen some more integrative presentations even existing on social media, which just because they're on social media doesn't discredit the education by any means. But there are some people out there who say there's no way social media is for social and it's for fun and it's all fake news or whatever.
I think we're also hearing more sessions like when we go to the Alliance meetings or other meetings, and just at AIS, I guess that was last month. There were a couple of sessions about millennials and Gen Z and how they're learning now and what that looks like. And I think, attending those sessions and modeling that behavior in our industry as well of what we're learning.
Oh, absolutely. It's the customized education is what people want, right? People no longer want, or the generations that are up and coming, including millennials, including Gen Xers, like people don't want to know what they don't have to know. Like there's limited capacity. I don't want to know things I'm not interested in. I don't want to know things that aren't necessarily relevant to me, but that customizable learning, which I think we're going to start to see more and more of with AI. I know that like I said, we've seen it in other platforms. It's just, I think it's going to be the next wave of kind of that future when it comes to education and learning and trying to bridge that gap from what we know as being tried and true to also integrating newer types of education. Time is definitely something that it requires: time, patience, and proof of concept again and again and again.
Yeah, I just wanted to add here too is that like we're talking about CME professionals a lot and the changing landscape of how we do work, but it's the same for our learners that are coming to our education activities, and so they are asking for the same things that we are doing in our work. And so I'm primarily with physician learners, but these learners are asking for the innovative formats. And so for us at my organization, we have added fellow resident planners to our activities to help bring some of those insights and those ways to kind of make it relevant to this. Those learners are going to be the CME professionals or the CPD professionals later. So bringing those people into your planning early can help add kind of close that bridge. So we've had some planners be like our live social media, like tweeters and like posting live updates. And those are like gaps we had just connecting with an online audience too, and creating a buzz about the education and the impact it has. And so having kind of those champions on your planning committee would be a great help too.
Yeah, I definitely think that having champions is always helpful, but especially in this context as well, to try and include those younger generations, get them to start providing their input, start working with, again, we're talking about, the cross-generational part. Scott, do you mind bringing back up the ARS results? Because I think that was one of the options too. And I'm kind of curious to see, cross-generational team collaborations, which is coming in at 28%. So I think that's also a really great opportunity. But again, thank you all for answering this. So it looks like, it seems like it's kind of across the board. And if you guys have other suggestions, feel free to type it in the chat as well. But, the mentorship programs here, flexible communication approaches, it's looking like it's coming in at 16%. And then the big one here is the shared professional development opportunities, which looks like a lot of people would really value and appreciate. Okay. Well, I think we have time to squeeze in our last question. So I will pose this last question to the panel. So how do you see technology shaping the future of CME, and what skills should professionals focus on developing?
I think as technology advances, we're only going to see more and more streamlining of workplace kind of dynamics and of what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like that workplace output. I know that we've seen it. I was a part of when I joined here. We all had desktops. Then we did with laptops. I remember when Skype for Business was a thing. Being able to communicate with your peers in your office, but like not get up and go talk to them, which I know sounds antisocial, but sometimes you just had a real quick question. Like we've seen those nuances continue to streamline our workflow for years now. I think it's only going to continue. I think it's only going to get more advanced, which I know I've had peers express concerns, especially regarding AI, like, oh, it's going to take our jobs, blah, blah, blah. Like, it's not intended to replace a person. It's just another adaptive tool. It's no different than when we migrated from post mail to emails. Like there's still mail. I still get mail every day and probably get like 800 times the amount of emails. But the communication can be faster, obviously, horse and pony to the man in the white truck to now just some dude behind, I don't know, some dude behind a server that just sends it straight to my computer. I think it's important to always continue to learn about new technologies as they come about, whatever those may be. Again, whether it's AI, like play around with ChatGPT, see what it can do. I personally struggle with writing bios about myself. I don't like talking about myself, but I'll happily tell ChatGPT and say, hey, write me a bio for the Alliance, please and thank you. Or, learn how to do a TikTok, like see what everybody else is doing, because there's probably going to be something that comes of that eventually too, as silly of a platform as that can be, or as mind numbing as a platform as that can be.
Yeah, so I agree, and I had to laugh because I actually did use ChatGPT for the same exact thing, a profile. So it's like, you don't like writing about yourself, you just throw your resume in there or whatever else, and write it up. And then, of course, you are responsible for your work. So I think, understanding that whatever ChatGPT or any other AI that you're using does, that, ultimately it does fall on you. You're the author. It is your work. So you are in charge of, data checking that and everything and making sure that it works. I actually use AI a lot to just generate first draft ideas on things and then go from there. And then there's so much AI out there. Like, I've looked at the list and it's honestly sometimes exhausting, but you can really try to find a lot of things that will be helpful for you. One way that's really helpful is just making sure that you're, I'm on volunteer groups and in different other groups and just saying, hey, what are you using and what are you finding helpful? So just sharing as a community what would be helpful in AI and how you're using it.
Yeah, I agree with everybody here on the panel that AI is definitely going to transform how we do our work, but as it's going to complement what we do, it's not going to replace. It's going to help us be more efficient, more productive. What would take hours is going to take minutes, and all sorts of tasks. So I think there's a lot of good work being done on how to use AI appropriately in CME, and there'll be a lot coming out soon about that. I do think there's other opportunities for technology and the way it will transform things. And the information overload that there's so much coming at us. I think like micro learning will be important, like on demands will be important. People that can like get education at their fingertips when they need it. Like Andrea was saying, like it's at your fingertips when it's relevant. That'll be really important. A learning model going forward, interactive learning. Social, we talked a little bit about that, like having these communities, these social communities and platforms where we can come together as a community and share cases or examples or problems that we're facing day to day. I think that's where a lot of learning is gonna be housed moving forward. And I don't think it's gonna be it's hard. It's a big shift from these like 1 day, 2 day, big day conferences that are all lecture based. There's definitely going to be a lot of transformation, and I don't know how much longer that's going to last as we move forward.
No, absolutely. Especially when you're looking at work time, life balances sort of situations. You go to a meeting for a week long. The information that is relevant or that you're interested in at the meeting, you might have been able to access in micro learning in an app instead, and being able to do that, like, oh, it's 3 a.m. and I can't sleep. I'm gonna read something real quick, or whatever that looks like. I mean, that can definitely change that dynamic that we were speaking about earlier to work-life balance and how those conferences will continue. I mean, I'm sure they'll always continue. There is validity to being in front of your peers, and there's a benefit to being able to network and socialize in that communication aspect. Which, real quick, and looking back at the second half of this question, what skills should professionals focus on developing? Something that I think people don't think much of, which is such a simple and yet complex skill at the same time, communication across generations. As we effectively grow and change and work looks different, communication is always going to be a skill that I think needs to continually be developed. In a time where everything feels so fast paced, and getting emails from your peers and sending emails to your peers. Like I'm very conscious of what I send out to make it as straight and to the point, but clear as possible. So that I'm not bogging down my colleagues, my peers with additional information that they may or may not need. Cause if they do need those details, they'll ask, but otherwise, offering them up front, from the beginning can kind of create that dynamic of the TLDR, too long, didn't read. And then nothing's getting done and you're back to square one with that communication that isn't effective.
Yeah, absolutely. I was, going back to the micro learning a little bit. It was funny because I was just talking to my supervisor who's not in continuing education. And I was talking about micro learning and she's like, okay, so how long is micro learning? Is that like 30 minutes? And I'm like, no. Like it has to be so much faster, so much quicker. Like you think of, to your point, TikTok, I'm watching a video for 5 seconds, and you like when you hear that number 5 seconds, you're like, that's ridiculous. How can you get anything in 5 seconds? But if it's not catching my attention in 5 seconds, then I'm on to the next thing. And I think that's how a lot of things are happening. Again, we have this information overload. We have a lot of things coming at us. Like I'm not going to wait to, wait for the hook or wait for something to grab me. I need something right away. And, it's funny because I'm also seeing this across the board. We're running into people not being able to find stuff on our website. We have this insanely large video library that has these full filters of everything. And that's just taking people too long, and they want things at their fingertips and they want it right now. So we're trying to implement a solution that they can just say, I need X, Y, and Z in this case scenario. They just type it in, they can even talk to it, and it will just pull the information right then and there for them. So yeah, I absolutely feel that. And I can see myself going into that kind of mode as well. So I know
I
how
think
it
I
is.
watched like 5 TikTok videos that were anywhere between 5 seconds and 30, and I know more than I ever want to know about P. Diddy right now.
Do you guys think that as we move forward, conferences will start having more, or should start having more networking sessions and more networking time, in your opinion?
I think so.
I was going to comment on that when Andrew was saying like the week-long conferences have value to them, or like the longer those may not go away, but I think the ones that are most successful are the ones that have more of the social components to them. And then
I think we also work remotely, and it's huge to have that opportunity sometimes, not just only to network with people outside of our work, but also even, sometimes inside of our companies too, for remote.
Yes.
Practice our in-person communication skills. Oh, I gotta talk to you face to face. Right.
All right. Well, I do have one question that I do want to ask you guys. I'll have the context slide up also. So this came over the Horizon CME text line. So you guys are talking about millennial work issues, but Gen Z is right behind you. Is there anything we should know about this part of the workforce that is going to help shape the future of CME?
It's an interesting question, because this was definitely something that we brought up in a lot of our brainstorming stuff. We had a hard time finding somebody in our industry, not to say that they aren't out there, but who is Gen Z, to kind of pick their brain on things. Having a few people that I know in my life, I would say like the one thing that I've noticed about Gen Z is they are a no BS generation. They don't want the fluff. They don't want to deal with what isn't relevant. They don't want to take the extra time to put on that like business, that Don Draper motif that we all just kind of followed. Like, oh, we're going to a conference, we have to wear a business suit. Like it's very straight and to the point, and kind of that, as we were talking about earlier, that customizable, what's relevant, and how you can be effective without still incorporating some of the things that we used to do for the sake of doing that. My first alliance I went to, 100% in a suit. Anymore, absolutely not. And the amount of women and people I see wearing sneakers instead of high heels, rock on, all the better. There's no reason.
Yeah. So, and I think, to that, I think also, again, we really couldn't find anybody that was Gen Z. I think we all tried to brainstorm and come up with someone who we knew was. But one thing that I have heard outside of our industry really does also repeat the whole, they want something relevant and something that's not super long. So just some of those considerations, I think some of the things that we talked about will be applicable there too. But I don't want to speak for Generation Z. So
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is probably our industry is so rarely a first career for anyone. So everyone transitions from someplace else doing something else. So people probably don't enter into our field until they're in their late 20s, early 30s. And so Gen Z is coming. It just might take a little more time. So, okay, great. Well, thank you guys all. I think this was a really enlightening session. It's great to hear kind of new, younger voices in CME Palooza to kind of break up some of the old codgers that we see on screen a lot. So
you call us young. We love that for us.
Yes. Thank you. So for folks who are watching either the live or recorded version, please note that we have a very traditional survey. You don't have to give us a short video clip. You can just click on a few things. You can ask ChatGPT to respond to the survey for you, and they can probably do a reasonably good job. So there's a link at the bottom of our live tab to answer that survey. And for those folks who want to view the next session, just look on the live page and click on the appropriate session link. It will start here in about 4 minutes. So with that, I would like to thank Alana and Andrea and Amy and Emily for joining us today. And I won't throw out any millennial terms. This session was lit. Yeah, good. All right. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you.